Hey everybody, what's going on? So in our favorite socialist republic, the People's Republic of Sweden, I think is their new title, it was decided by one of their biggest unions, or one of at least their bigger unions, Unionen, and they were going to set up hotlines for women to call into if they ever feel overwhelmed by that great societal ill, mansplaining. Now, mansplaining, for those of you who don't know, the reported definition of it is a man explaining something to a woman in a manner that is regarded as condescending and patronizing. So, two things to take away right away. One is that, it's obviously subjective. It's not an objective thing that you can point to and say, yep, that's mansplaining, because it's like the definition they usually put forward, it's in a manner regarded as condescending or patronizing. Well, what I would regard or what you would regard are not the same things. We can have very different tolerance levels when it comes to rude behavior or what we'd consider condescending or patronizing. So that's the first obvious problem with this idea. The second one, of course, is that like all social justice terms, the definitions mean nothing. The definition simply changes to suit whatever the narrative needs it to suit. It changes in order to advance a particular set of goals or leftist ideals. So it's the usual bastardization of language. They don't care about consistency whatsoever. So I don't know if that definition will work in a year or so. Maybe they'll expand it to include snarky YouTubers as well as condescending or patronizing explanations of things. Who knows, right? We live in the age of can't be too fucking sure that the world won't go that kind of crazy. So I got two things to offer, kind of my thoughts on this. One is that this is obviously the continued infantilization of women that our society seems very keen on promoting and pushing forward at all costs. I predict that this will probably backfire. If the idea behind this, right, was to get women to be maybe more assertive, more confident, more prepared for work or for interacting with other people, I think it'll completely backfire, because what this is doing is giving them a crutch. It's not allowing them to build up some sort of basic resiliency skills, just generally grow a thicker skin. I think if this becomes very well spread out and commonly used, it'll just result in women becoming even more meek and dependent on somebody else to solve their problems for them. A lot of what feminists preach, about the independence of women. It's not the independence of women, it's just the independence of women from the men in their lives that are, most likely to love them unconditionally, and to replace the men with some form of either government or even just, private sector institutions. It's about replacing men, not making women independent. Generally, women don't even really like to be independent. Of course, women are getting more depressed now than they've ever been, despite the fact that, ostensibly speaking, they are the freest and most independent women of any age in human history. As far as continuing the infantilization of women, it's obviously, I think, privileging women over men, because it gives them an additional source of a support structure that men will not have access to. Now, I don't think men should have access to this, nor do I think women should have access to this. But hey, if you're going to treat people like kids, why not just treat everyone like a kid? At least be consistent. So I think, men probably, I would imagine men as well run into maybe condescending or patronizing women that assume that because they're a man, he's a Homer Simpsonite. He doesn't really have any particular skills other than sitting on a couch and playing Xbox. Not that there's anything wrong with sitting on a couch and playing video games all day. I used to do it. It's not that bad. If you don't have anyone else, depending on you and no other responsibilities, fuck it, go ahead. Yeah. So this obviously gives women a access to social resources that men do not have. A profound and obvious hypocrisy here. If I could maybe tolerate this a little bit more if it was gender, neutral, or it was just a hotline for people, for frustrated employees to call into if they thought that somebody was being unfair to them at work, something like that. I can get behind that. That seems fine. I'd still think, well, you should really try to go through the personal steps in order to get a bit more resiliency when dealing with people you might not prefer to deal with. But at least it be universal, right? Like it'd be fair to everyone. But it's not fair to everyone. It's privileging women over men, doubling down on female privilege, continuing the infantilization of women, taking away, giving them all the rights and luxuries of civilized society, and taking away all of the responsibilities that would compel them to act responsibly in that society. So that's I got my second point here. I think it would also lead to a hostile work environment between men and women. Particularly, I'm thinking of like an office environment where people are sitting in a cubicle, relatively small space for a long periods of time. They have to get to know the people around them because they're only like working maybe 6 or 7 feet apart from each other. I think this will create a lot of division between the men and the women because what's going to happen is that the men are not going to want to work with the women um, in order to, solve problems or get through the workday. Because, like I said, this definition, this mansplaining thing is incredibly subjective. It's got no standard interpretation. It can mean whatever you want in the moment because it's all about what is regarded as condescending or patronizing. Why would men want to take that kind of risk? Like why would they want to interact with women when this is such a clear, when this, I think, would obviously lead to suspensions of men from work, possibly them getting fired or reprimanded or some other form of punishment if they were to trigger a particularly vindictive woman. Reading through this article I'm linking down in The Independent, this whole idea is to advise women on what they should be doing when encountered with mansplaining. And I think you'd have to be pretty naive if at least a couple of these feminist comedians and gender theoreticians that will be manning these hotlines are not going to suggest some sort of institutional punishment on the men who, probably completely, probably almost completely ignorant of this whole gender degradation, and we're just speaking normally. So yeah, the hostile work environment, it's going to probably push more men out of the work sphere. And this is the funny thing that feminists never seem to get either. Like the more they do stupid shit like this, the more they push men out of traditional, typical society, the more they just don't want to interact with women because it comes with so many liabilities now for a lot of men in certain circumstances, like in these office environments where they are so chastised and, for all intents and purposes, neutered, not allowed to express any form of basic masculinity for fear of offending a particularly sensitive woman who's incredibly insecure about herself and feels the need to bring down others, in this case men who are maybe more assertive. I think it's probably some lack of confidence in her own sexual market value. That's probably another video altogether. So that's about all I have to say about this whole article. It's just another one example on the growing mound of bullshit that is going to sink the gender relations of men and women in the West even further into the bottomless abyss that it is now. I should have finished this thought earlier, excuse me. One last thing to mention. Like I said, it's going to push, this will probably lead, this kind of thing pushes more men out of what you call traditional society. and eventually it makes them give up on trying to be masculine. Because what would be the point? They're going to be punished for it, so they'll just continue to be boyish. They'll continue to be kind of infantilized themselves, because the incentive towards being masculine is being taken away from them. And there's no greater incentive for a man than to earn the approval or the respect of women. You take that incentive away, men will become even less masculine. They'll become more boyish. They'll become less interested in greater society. And MGTOWs, basically. And any MGTOWs who listen to this, I'm not judging you guys at all. Go do what you want. But I do think that, not every man can't go MGTOW. Like, all the shit would just fall apart if that happened. But of course, the other result of that feminists never seem to really understand is that it's just going to make women even more unhappy. Women do not like, generally speaking, don't like boyish guys. Like, there's obviously a niche there. But the average woman likes masculine men because no shit. That's what biology has determined and figured out for thousands of years. Like, this didn't change just because gender studies was invented as a subject in a particularly liberal college. So the women will look at the men who have now become less masculine. They'll be even angrier. They'll become, you'll have even more angry cat ladies in their 50s who are just miserable people and want to bring everyone down around them because they couldn't get a man, and now they're just angry with themselves because they spent all their early years being cunty and calling hotlines to report men who are working with them because they explained something maybe a bit too, patronizingly. That's probably not a word. But I think you guys know what I mean. That might be another video I should do, kind of on its own subject. I feel like I say that too fucking much. This is a video I should do, but I never actually get around to it. I need to start making a list. I need to get this channel more organized. It's a priority of mine that I need to start focusing on. But that's about all, everyone. Take care.